Eric Stone, welcome to the conversation today.
John, it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
It is a pleasure to be with you. I'm really excited to have a nice conversation today. Today, we're going to be talking about building and measuring a high performance culture in the workplace. Where are you joining us from today?
I am on the Connecticut shore, a little town called Old Lyme, Connecticut.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm joining the conversation from Salt Lake City area in Utah. As we talk about building and measuring a high-performing culture in the workplace, this is a topic I feel strongly about. I think a lot about, and I talk about frequently, with my students on the podcast. I'm super excited to get your insights as we explore this together. And as we get started, I wanted to share Eric's bio with everybody. Eric Stone's passion for business led him to an influential 26-year career at the iconic rental car company Enterprise Holdings, where he quickly became one of the most decorated regional vice presidents in the company's history. His ability to connect and motivate employees from all different generations and demographics allowed his team to sustain top-level results and a culture of pride. Eric attributes much of this success to his ability to create, ignite, and sustain a high performance culture, one that enabled him to lead his teams through challenges like 9/11, the Great Recession, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Great Resignation, along with an extraordinary ability to adapt to the unexpected and help others to do the same. Now, I could share a whole lot more about you, Eric. There's so much tremendous accolades and things that you've accomplished over your career, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background, personal context before we dive on in?
John, I think you did a great job. The only add-on now from the book is I now do speaking engagements for associations or organizations. So I have officially become, John, an international speaker with my last gig. So that's probably the
Nice.
only add-on.
Wonderful, wonderful. And again, wonderful to have you to talk about the book, to talk about your speaking, and we'll give you a chance to share a little bit more about that at the end of the episode, so people know how to find you and can book you for those things. Okay, let's start by talking about maybe some of the biggest myths about culture. As we're talking about building and measuring a high performance culture, first we got to bust the myths.
I would say, at least from what I hear and gather in the circles I'm around, is everyone thinks it's this hugs and high fives,
Mhm.
soft, philosophical, very abstract, built on, rousing speeches and charismatic leaders. And of course, there is
Mm.
components to that. But what I've found in my 30 plus years of experimenting and leading is it really comes down, culture becomes the catalyst to execution. So
Mm.
I think the myths are those. And one of the reasons I ended up wanting to write the book, there were many, but I wanted to really redefine from my viewpoint what workplace culture is all about. You can have empathy with accountability and you can lead with a high standard and high character. It's not
Yeah.
just one of. So,
Yeah. No, I like that. And I agree. It's not just like the warm fuzzies, it's not just the woo-woo stuff, whatever, sometimes it gets characterized that way and it's a caricature. Certainly, yes, empathy, it's good. Certainly, you can have caring for each other. You can have a positive environment where people want to show up. Those are all positive things. But we're not just talking about like all the feel good stuff. We're having a good, positive, healthy workplace culture can mean accountability. It can mean, making sure that people are accomplishing things. Having high performance is a part of a dynamic, healthy culture. Nobody wants to work at a place where nobody's doing their part, nobody's contributing. That's not a healthy place. So, so ultimately, having a good workplace, having a healthy culture, having a high performing organizational culture, it's about mutual accountability and trust. It's about people pulling their weight. It's about, people innovating and creating and doing cool things. That's the kind of place people want to be in. And they want to do it in a place where there's psychological safety, where they have an opportunity to contribute in meaningful, authentic ways. so on and so forth. And that doesn't just have to be like the woo-woo, warm fuzzy, whatever, caricature that sometimes it gets portrayed as. And it's not a dichotomy. It's not like either like cutthroat, hyper competitive. It's not either that or like we're just giving each other hugs all the time. Like you can have something somewhere in between where you're still productive, competitive, innovative, but also not screaming in each other's faces and like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I one of my lines was it was interesting. The more I felt my team had an ability to be coached, trained, and developed, the more comfortable I felt to have those really difficult, challenging conversations and continuing to raise the standard. So right to what you're saying is, yeah, those special organizations do something a little bit different and they balance a little bit of the both. And you
Yeah.
go look at, whether it's a sports team or a great organization, and usually the great ones have a way to do that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned sports. So let's talk for a minute about like one of the great examples of high performing teams, like the Chicago Bulls, going back way back in time, back to the 90, the three-peat 90s Chicago Bulls and Jordan and all of those great players. They were competitive, right? Jordan is known for being competitive, for getting in people's faces, for all of those types of things, right? And probably not the most pleasant person to be around all the time. Uh, but that wasn't the only dynamic there. So when you're talking about like some balance, when you're talking about give and take, you know, Phil Jackson was also known as kind of the Zen coach. He was known as the masterful one that could kind of bridge the egos and bring everyone together. And there were other members of the team that balanced Jordan's like hyper competitiveness and even Jordan, like everyone knew, even though he was like could get in people's faces and was hyper competitive, everyone knew that he was just about giving his all and he expected the same of others. And it was mutual accountability. He wasn't, holding someone to a standard that he wasn't holding himself to. And so you know, and what did they accomplish? They accomplished greatness. And ultimately they all look back on that as, was it hard? Yes. Was it exhausting? Yes. But they look back on it with great pride. They look back on it as something that was amazing and that
Yeah.
they were all glad they were a part of. And I think it's just an example of, yes, you can have a mix and it probably isn't going to look the same in every team, in every organization. And ultimately, it depends on the makeup. It depends on who the people
Yeah.
are.
I could give you, that's a great example. And I'll share a quick story. I'm no Michael Jordan, unfortunately, but I try to be, I guess. And so a quick story was when we would get someone promoted to the next level or to a neighboring operation, we would have a little bit of what we would call a roast. And the roast was a little
Mm.
fun way to have some fun and point things out and, you know, get people excited about wanting to get to that next level. Well, I was the person who got promoted. I was really hard on, and I had to be really hard on. And I certainly offered and tried to build strong relationships and clearly communicate your goals and expectations and provide the right material, equipment to be successful and to really know them personally and professionally and reward top performance. But I was tough and I needed to be. And it probably hurt our relationship slightly throughout. But when he gave his speech at the end, and he was in tears, and he said, Eric, I know you were tough on me, and I needed every bit of that toughness to be able to go where we ended up going together. I thank you for that. And so sometimes in the minute, it might not be perfect. And I think that's where that myth also comes from. It's not always going to be perfect. You will have some difficult conversations as long as they're well intended in providing and giving people that right direction. And so, similar to when they asked Will Purdue of the Bulls, who was just really a role player, he said, you know what? I look back, we needed every bit of what Michael Jordan was doing. Not on the court, I mean off the court, and the challenging every single day. So it goes in the workplace too.
Yeah, and it can be uncomfortable. And we're not perfect, right? We're not perfect, regardless of whatever our intentions may be. And you said it. If we're trying our best, I think people will try to give us the benefit of the doubt, especially if we own it. Like if I do something and I just mess up, or I say something, I go over the line, or whatever. If I just own it and I go back to that person and I say, hey, I'm sorry. I went too far. I went over the line. I hope this doesn't impact our ability to work together. I value, our relationship. I really enjoy working with you, whatever, right?
Mhm.
Um, you can get past it. Like it's not that hard. Like just be grown-ups, right? Like people understand that you have a bad day or, sometimes things don't come out right or whatever. And you really can get past it. So you don't have to like hold yourself to a standard of perfection either, because that's impossible. And you're gonna like wear yourself out, trying to be perfect when you can't. But ultimately, just an intention and a striving towards treating people with dignity and respect will go a really long way towards achieving, what we're trying to achieve, even though we know we're not always going to get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of those unintentionally overlooked aspects, in our day-to-day decision making, that might impact the type of culture that we want. Sometimes this might be, in the office space, like face to face. Sometimes this might be in a hybrid or remote kind of setting. Leaders are trying to lead their teams, and they're making decisions each and every day. A lot of times we're putting out fires. A lot of times we're just in the daily grind of just trying to get stuff done or whatever. So we're making all these decisions. Um, what advice would you have, or like how do we manage, in the grind, when we're kind of rapid decision making mode, those types of potential unintended um, consequences or overlooked impacts?
Yeah, I think there's a real importance of finding that balance between is your organization number one? Should they be in person, remote, or hybrid? I think the first part really that goes to almost the unintended is however your organization decides to do this, whatever way you're going to manage the workplace. What I think is overlooked is actually the customer's experience. It
Mm,
is to say we are putting, and rightfully so, the employee experience first. And there's all this dialogue about we've got to be fair and firm with your employees, and geez, they need to be in the office. However you do it, it just can't affect the customer's experience. And those are the unintended things that I think we really got to focus on is I don't know if we're focusing on that as much. And I've seen just like with Gallup showing engagement being down, and when
yeah.
engagement's down, your business outcomes tend to go down and customer service. I don't know about your experiences, John, but I have not had an amazing run of great wow moments in business. And so, however you choose to do it, there are some standard practices. I actually listed a few of them when I was going over the roast example of if you're in person, remote, or hybrid, just make sure you have a channel to develop those relationships. What is the way? Is it a coffee talk? How are you trying to lather, rinse, repeat a consistent cadence where you at least start being present for your team and building that trust and support they need? When you're in, however you do it, are you clearly communicating those goals and expectations? It's much harder at home, in my opinion, to stay disciplined and focused. There's so many distractions. So, however you decide to do it, you just got to be clear with what the space at home needs to kind of look like. And the training, you still got to train, even if you're in Minnesota, but your corporate headquarters is in Oklahoma. You still have to find ways within the typical month to produce some of those opportunities for development. Because what people see in the training is some people are burnt out and some people are bored out. And you need to take that training and find a way to continually push people. And you still have to get to know people personally, professionally. You still have to find a way to develop relationships. You can still have me and you, John, have a meeting, and then the last 20 minutes of that meeting, you could have a financial planner who comes in and says, "Hey, we got a quick little thing about budgeting that's going to happen that helps you be better in person. Well, I should say at home or at the workplace." And so, I think the bigger unintended to the question is just don't let the customer experience be affected.
Yeah. Well, I like the framing around the customer experience because there's so much talk about the employee experience, which is certainly important too. Um, a lot of times when we're talking about back to office mandates, I think mostly what's going on in the head of the executive is either sunk cost fallacy. They're like, we have all this office space that we have leased. We should be utilizing it, so force everyone to come back. That's kind of a dumb reason, if that's the only reason. um, or maybe it's a lack of trust. So I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they're working, so they all need to come back. That's a dumb reason to have people come back. That having a culture where you don't have trust for your employees, that's toxic. So that's a dumb reason. Sometimes it's a ploy to get people to quit because people don't want to come back. And so you're trying to prune out and get people to quit so you don't have to pay severance or whatever. That's kind of a gross reason. So there's negative reasons to do back to office mandates, but there's plenty of good reasons to do back to office mandates if it makes sense for the organization, for the work that you do, for the products and services you provide. And you just highlighted one of them. Like, does it make sense for the customer? Like, if
Yeah.
you put the customer hat on and you're trying to have a positive customer experience, and it makes all the sense in the world that in order to do that, you need to have people in the office, then by all means, call your people back to the office and explain that to them. Help them understand that so they don't just automatically go to those negative ones that I just mentioned,
Yeah.
because they may jump to those and just explain, no, 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 no. That's not what we're doing here. We have your back. Like we trust you. We want to do right by you, but we also need to do right by our customers because they're why we're here.
Yeah.
And your people will understand if you're being honest and authentic, and so as long as we do that and stay customer focused, I think we'll be in great shape.
I think that's the key. Whatever you decide to do, just be authentic with it. It is okay to say we want people here. We think it builds a better chemistry. We think we can be more agile and flexible and bring people together versus trying to orchestrate meetings and meeting calls and emails and whatever your true reason is, stay to it. What I find, whether it's in sales, service, or running an organization, is people get off track of what the real reason is. And then all of a sudden it becomes this gossip of, I can't believe they're having us do this. Who do they think we are? Just be, hey, this is how we operate as a business. We feel it's better for us and our customers from an engagement side because the employee has the right to, they can either stay or they can go. Now, we don't want them to go, but just be true to who you're trying to be. Give a really good reason of why you're doing it. Hopefully, from a leadership standpoint, it makes sense. And from an employee perspective, which is the key word, the perspective also makes sense. So it's a very interesting dilemma that everyone's going through. And everyone has their preferences. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Eric, this has just been a really fun conversation, and we've only scratched the surface. Like, there's so much more we could talk about, but I also note the time. I need to let you go here in a few minutes. As we start to wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, more about your speaking engagements and such, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
you could go, LinkedIn's probably the preferred method of communication, and you could check some of my recent posts or get to learn a little bit about me and the book. And that's probably the easiest, though I am on Instagram, thanks to my daughter, Clear Path Ventures underscore. But LinkedIn's probably the best channel. And if you wanted to get a hold of me for speaking or helping with organizational performance and development, you can go there as well. Certainly go to the website clearpathventures.com. And if there was a way to wrap everything up, and God, there's so much more we could talk about, but if you do
Right.
want unique results, you better have unique relationships. And since we started with relationships on one of the first factors I talked about, maybe we'll kind of end with it. But within the book, it goes from the hiring and how do you hire to match your culture to how do you become the distraction catcher and communicate clearly using this ABC method. So much more to even what you were mentioning earlier. How do you measure it? Is there this way to check the health of your organization? All in the book if you're interested. And if not, just look at some posts and hopefully you can learn something from that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Eric. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Eric can do for you. Check out the book, check out his resources, his articles, check out his speaking opportunities. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great